So we think we're going to listen for a little bit, a few words about this Bodhichitta business, see how it's relevant to our lives, take tools from it to develop our qualities, our potential, so we can help others. Nama Sangye Chadang Soke Chognam La Jancho Baru Dagni Kyabsu Chi Dagi Chonyen Gipe Sonam Ki Dola Penche Sangye Rupa Shok Sangye Chadang Soke Chognam La Jancho Baru Dagni Kyabsu Chi Dagi Chonyen. What happened to the prayer? Why is it on the screen? We normally have the prayer on the screen for the people. What happened? There we go. Okay, Sangye Charan Soke Chognam La, Jangcho Baru Dagni Kyapsu Chi, Dagi Chernyen Gipe Sonam Ki, Drola Pinche Sangi Drupa Shog. That's about 3 times, I think. Okay, so you can easily divide all the Buddhist techniques, the practices, into two sections. One is this bird needs 2 wings business. The bird needs 2 wings, wisdom and compassion. So the wisdom wing is about all the nuts and bolts of Buddhist teachings about specifically for oneself, how to develop one's own potential, how to get happy and stop suffering. All of that. Then, on the basis of that, when we open our eyes and realize we're all in the same boat, then there are the teachings that help us help others. As the Dalai Lama says, compassion is not enough. Being kind is not enough. You need wisdom, and the wisdom comes from all the nuts and bolts of putting yourself together. It's the thing I think we understand that when it comes to being like that. If you're going to want to be a nutritionist, you can't just have compassion. If you don't know anything about nutrition, you'd be totally useless. People don't care how much compassion you've got. You make a mess. Get some wisdom. Please go to school. And it's the same with everything in our world. But as soon as like music or cooking or any body of knowledge, you know perfectly well, you have the compassion, you want to help others learn music, you want to help others play football, you want to help others, be more healthy. But as soon as it comes to spiritual practice, we don't think that way. Or helping people, just in broad terms, emotionally. We never recognize that, if we're a mess, if we haven't put ourselves together, how on earth can you help someone else? It's so obvious, Or even this way, even if we could even say, and that's what we just talk about today, you want to help others, you have compassion, you see the world as suffering, poor people, poor animals, poor this, poor that. You can help, but unless you've done any work on yourself, your help will be limited. And this is not evident to us. Don't think like this. We have discussed it like this last week. Because working on your own mind means becoming less angry, less fearful, less anxious, less depressed, less attached. That's what working on yourself means. The result of practice is become less of all those things. So the 2 benefits from that, one is that you're more content, but the other one is you're more clear. Because one of the consequences of attachment and anger, jealousy and low self-esteem and anxiety, they make you miserable, but they also make you as blind as a bat. And that's what's fascinating. We know it's true. If you're really depressed, you can't see anybody or anything else. The world just appears to you as this miserable, grey, boring place, isn't it? And you can't even notice other people suffering. It just reminds you of your own, so you want to not look, Let's say you have depression, or you're a little bit depressed, which means sad, and the world, and then you look at the world and it makes you even more depressed. And how can you help anybody? You can't. Here, So in wisdom in this context isn't the wisdom where you go to school and learn nutrition or learn music or learn carpentry, get the skill. But the skill you need is by working on your own mind using Buddhist techniques. And that's not so evident to us. Because as we've been talking, you can help your brother. Your compassion for your brother, and your brother's an alcoholic, let's say, something as simple as that. So look, you love your brother, you want him to be happy. You have compassion for your brother, you want him not to suffer. And you want to help him. But the trouble is, you're really limited in helping him, because when you realize you've got your own attachment and fears and your anger and your anxieties, which make a mess of you, you can't see your brother properly. He just freaks you out. Wish he'd just go away, you know? Or the attachment in you, which can't stand seeing this unhappy suffering, you barge in, stick your nose where it doesn't belong, thinking that you're helping him, but you've got no wisdom whatsoever. He doesn't need your help. He hasn't asked you. We don't care. When you have attachment, you don't care if the person wants our help. We're going to barge in and help them. You get all arrogant. They need my help. You know, run around all sentimentally trying to help people, but you're making a mess. This is really kind of, we know that you can see this. And the other point we've been making is that if you have compassion, you see all the suffering of the world, and then you find it unbearable to see it because it is pretty intense. You think you're suffering because of compassion. Well, this is where you have to understand the Buddhist view of the mind, you know, very clear. You've got the neurotic, I-based, fear-based, constricted, unhappy states of mind, attachment, anger, anxiety. They make you miserable. And then you have compassion, and we think, oh my God, look at all that suffering. I can't bear looking at it. It makes me I want to kill myself. You don't have compassion. You don't suffer because you have compassion. Positive states of mind can't make you suffer. This is an unusual way to put it. We don't think like this. You know? The Buddha would say we've got these unhappy, neurotic, constricted, miserable states of mind. One, that cause me misery, and two, prevent me from clearly seeing other people. And that pollutes my compassion. And then two, you've got the positive states of mind, which can't cause you suffering. And that's a surprise to us, because we think, look at all the suffering in the world. I'm suffering because I have compassion. No, you're suffering because you have attachment that can't stand seeing bad things. When you had that for your brother, it makes you anxious and worried. So you barge in, trying to force him to not be an alcoholic, thinking you're being kind, but it's really just driven by your own need that he be a nice person so you can feel better. We can't see it this way. It's very hard to see this. It sounds quite brutal. It's true. When you've got more wisdom, what that means is you've got less attachment, less anger, less anxiety. So you're more steady, you're more clear. And you can then see others suffering, but you can also see whether or not they want your help. That's what wisdom means. When you've got a lot of attachment, we try to manipulate people, force them to do what we think is best. It's so rude. Or what happens is, let's say you've discovered AA, say you've been a bit of an old junkie, and you've discovered the benefits of AA, and you're all excited about it, and you run around forcing everybody to come to AA because you've discovered it. It's like you've seen a good movie, and you make everybody else go to see the movie, as if you've been kind. No, you're sticking your nose in their business. Mind your own business. They mightn't like your boring old movie. You might be ready for boring old AA. So wisdom is the ability to see more clearly people who are suffering, and then if you can see that they're ripe and ready for some advice, and you'll give the advice. But if they're not, you'll just love them for who they are. And that's hard for us to do. So what's this bodhicitta then? Well, this bodhicitta, this word in Sanskrit. In the Buddhist path, there are these more, in the compassion teachings, these really kind of intense, advanced levels of compassion that seem crazy in our culture. And they culminate in this incredibly amazing view, quality, where you've made this huge shift in your mind in a stable way from much practice. Where now you only have love and compassion for others. There's no longer the thought of I. This, we do not have texts. That sounds like you're trying to be a saint, and we don't have courses on how to be a saint. You don't go to university. I'd like to enroll in a course of how to be a saint and graduate as a saint. It sounds like a joke, you know. So bodhisattva is just this word in Sanskrit that you could argue is equivalent to a person who's a saint. Buddhism would say we've got that potential, not overnight, that's for sure. So the attitude of bodhicitta, which is driven by compassion, may you not suffer, and driven by love, may you be happy. is the thought to want to be of benefit to others. I mean, at the moment, all we can do is according to our own capacity, isn't it? According to our capacity. The Buddhist teachings would say there are these levels that you can reach, so very advanced, which would mean you've gone beyond attachment, anger, jealousy, neurosis, ego. And that's extreme. We don't have any equivalent, I think, in our modern psychological models. So let's just talk about love and compassion. That we can practice. So it's hard. We know we like the idea of seeing, having compassion for people. But part of the problem here too is I think it's a bit limited view. The compassion we have is a bit limited. I think without analyzing, we only really have compassion for innocent victims. I think so. If you see, a thief is suffering, you go, may he suffer. You wouldn't have compassion for him. He deserves it, you'd say. But a child, or a little doggy, then you have compassion for them. But as soon as you see a dog, even if you see a dog that's really aggressive and eating every other dog, you almost wouldn't have compassion. You'd probably kill him. That's what we do in our culture. They're too difficult, you kill them. You won't have compassion for a poodle, but you won't have compassion for a rat. So we can see we've got limited compassion. In other words, we have compassion for those we're attached to. Isn't it? We can see that. Very limited. So what's the basis of valid compassion, if you like? Is that individual beings, each in their own way, has got their own sets of suffering. As our other trouble is the definition we have of suffering is only the gross kind, when the bad things happen, when you're in pain, or you're in a war zone, or you're being stolen from or harmed. But as we know from Buddhist teachings, there's a more subtle level of suffering, which means mentally, with a lot of attachment or a lot of anger. We can see, that we accept actually, people, but we tend, or even that one, anger. No, if we see a person who's very angry, we won't have compassion for them. But if a person's depressed, we have compassion for them because they're nice people. They don't harm others. So as soon as you harm others, I don't care how you're suffering. Stop, you won't have compassion. So we have a very limited, selective view of compassion, don't we? I think it's true. So how do we then try to cultivate? What's the Buddha's view on how to cultivate the view of compassion for everybody? How is it that everybody deserves compassion? And that's to do with understanding the mind. So the Buddha's idea is we've all got attachment, this emotional hunger, this neediness, this expectation, this sense I haven't got enough. This is the root of our suffering. And that's what then causes us to do bad things that harm others. But just having those qualities is the thing to look at into our own mind. I think we can see that, especially these days. There's so much therapy around, so many different methods. People depressed, anxious. We can see that kind of suffering. But somehow, if it was a person who's mega rich, that is beautiful, and has got wonderful big houses and money in the bank, and they're depressed, we think, oh, who cares, If you're depressed and you're poor, then we'll have compassion for you. So we can really see we're limited. So the real way to see that everybody, to one degree or other, is suffering because of attachment and anger and jealousy and the other unhappy states of mind. The only way we're going to see that in others is see it in ourselves. And that's a tough one. We know we have them, but we don't, and often we say, oh, I can have compassion for other people, but not for myself. This is the Buddha's view of why we all suffer. So in other words, suffering has such a level. It's not just having a pain in the knee. It's having a pain in your mind, You might be totally physically healthy and rich, but you're going to have an unhappy mind, And that's the thing. That for the Buddha is really what the root of suffering is. All these unhappy emotions inside our heads, They're what make me miserable right now. And we know in our lives, if we look very carefully, we mightn't be pedophiles, we mightn't be multi-murderers, but if we can see in our lives and be sincere, we know we've done some actions sometimes that harm others. We know that. So this is the point. From a Buddhist perspective, the reason we harm others with our body and speech is because we're driven, we're unhappy, we've got the attachment or anger or anxiety or jealousy or depression. If you're full of love and kindness, you won't harm others. Of course you wouldn't. I'm going to steal from you for your sake. Rubbish. So the first step in Buddhist practice is start to see your own mind and to see how that's causing you pain. And that's the problem also, as we talked. We can't even see that. We know we're anxious and angry and depressed, but it's not my fault, baby. It's his fault, it's her fault, and their fault. So to really begin to own our own mind and to see that we don't, it's even half of us, we even see that we're suffering. We don't think we're suffering. We think our life's lovely, I'm a nice person, I have nice food, and I've got a nice job, and nice hubby, and nice children. We've all got attachment. We don't even notice it. We don't even notice it. So it's quite hard to see, hard to look at it and own it. Not out of guilt, not out of shame, but out of just intelligence, you know. The Buddha's deal. Then we start to put ourselves together, become more content, more clear, therefore more wise, therefore more able to see others and how they are suffering, even in their mind. But you'll never see other people suffering from the perspective of jealousy and anger and depression until you see your own. Not possible. Impossible. So the key to understanding all this is the Buddhist view of the mind, which, as we know from talk, is divided into the unhappy, neurotic, delusional, depressing states of mind that limit us, that cut us off from others, that constrict us and blind us. And then the positive qualities, the virtues, the clarity, the kindness, the wisdom, the intelligence, the compassion. They're our saving grace. They're the reason we are happy, and they are the basis for our ability to make others happy. But the other thing is that I think, you know, the Buddhist approach is that in the same way that you can go to do a course in music, you start off not playing a single note and you can end up being like Bach. It's a progress. We know that's what courses make you do. You learn to cook. You learn to be a carpenter. You graduate as a carpenter. We don't think, I think we don't think that way when it comes to being a happy person or a compassionate, beneficial person. I think we see these qualities in us as absolute, as sort of like set in stone. I've got some kindness, but to think that I can grow kindness to a limitless degree, we don't think like that. And then we think about doing, you know, we think about compassion, but a very vague notion of compassion. You know, oh, the poor people out there have tears. But we don't think of it as something you can grow. I really think we don't think of it as something you can grow. It's like you can grow the ability to be a musician. You grow the ability to be a cook. Well, the Buddha's approach is you can grow your ability to be beneficial to others. You can grow love and compassion. That's the point. So if we think of doing a meditation on compassion, let's say, we vaguely imagine it's sort of like it makes you want to cry. It's all kind of gooey and kind of emotional. That's nonsense. The Buddha's point is that all these states of mind, the emotional ones like love and compassion or anger and jealousy, they're all rooted in being conceptual stories in our head. And we can grow. So the meditations we do, you know, the meditations we do to develop compassion, they're very intense, you know, meditations on using logic and analysis to argue with ego's misconceptions. And it's in that way that you gradually shift your conceptual stories deep in the bones. It's very surprising to us. So we started off, you know, with we mentioned the very first technique is this development of equanimity. That we have to recognize that enemies, friends, and strangers, enemies are those who are the object of our anger, friends are the object of our attachment, and strangers are the object of our indifference. These three people, these three groups of people, for us, are completely different. But in fact, from their point of view, are equal, are the same from one point of view. They wish to be happy, and they wish not to suffer. We have to recognize that. And that takes logic to argue with ego's misconceptions. Right now, we only have love and compassion for the friend. We do not have love and compassion for the enemy. We couldn't care less about the strangers. And that's normal world. Everybody on the planet has that, including the dogs and the monkeys. So we've got to know our minds well, see all these misconceptions in our bones and argue with them, sort of like reconstruct, develop new conceptual stories in our head. That's how you meditate. That's how you change your mind. Not just have an emotional feeling every now and again. It's not stable. Anybody have any questions? And it takes hard work because, I mean, we have this very instinctive feelings, you know, about people, things. It's not easy to change our mind, you know. Are there any questions at all? Anybody have any questions out of interest? Yes. Yeah. I think it's both. I think it's with all the practices, it's both. It's definitely both. I mean, the very gradual. So the Buddhist approach to practice is first you start on controlling your body and speech and stop harming others. Then you start to work on your mind and get less attacked and less angry and less jealous. And then you start to grow love and grow compassion incrementally, one step at a time. So you're going to grow your quality, the intensity of your compassion, but also you grow more and more compassion for everybody because you realize we're all kind of in the same boat. And that just takes time to see it. You know?
And that's then exactly what you were talking about with working on ourselves.
Yeah.
Is because the more that you understand I don't like to say faults or mistakes, but you know, our own weaknesses.
That's exactly right.
And even maybe something that's happened through trauma or something that's happened in our life experience.
That's right.
The more that we understand that we have just as much fault as anybody else in this world, then we can see each other and look past those things that we might build our stereotypes.
Exactly. That's exactly right. You understand very well.
Thank you.
And it's one step at a time. Sometimes I think we feel one day I'm feeling all loving and compassion and have tears, but next day I want to kill somebody. It's too unstable. So we've got to grow it steadily, one step at a time. And that's the Buddha's view. In the same way you can grow your ability to play music better and better and better. The Buddha's approach is we can develop our minds better and better and better. It's really progressive. And I think if we have confidence in that, then we can have more self-confidence. You know?
Because then it also comes down to forgiveness. Because I think the more that we look at ourselves and understand that a lot of the things that we look at as faults, we're of no, we didn't decide, we didn't make a decision, we didn't make a mistake. It was just something that we were born with or how we are. And the more that we can find forgiveness for these things, then I think the more that we can find forgiveness for others.
That's right. No, exactly. And the way the Buddhist approach would say it, the more you can own responsibility for your old habits. You know, of course, Buddha would say we come into this life with them. You know, we didn't get them from our mummy or daddy. So, you know, if we can take responsibility and be humble, there's all these old habits of mine. They're not my nature. I can change. Then it's like, that's like forgiving yourself. Rather than trying to get off the hook and say it's not my fault. Which ego wants to do. Then we can understand others. Absolutely true. Very true. But it's progressive. That's the key point. It's one step at a time, you know. Anybody on Zoom has something to say? Ask. No. No. Of course, the biggest one in Buddhist teaching, which is a really tough one in our culture, and that's the point you brought up. You said, you know, you're kind of born with it. So the Buddhist idea would be, you know, that you did come into this life with it. So of course, if you're a Christian or a Muslim, there's no concept like that. You just God made you, whatever reason is. How the Christians and Muslims explain why you have mistakes, I'm not quite sure. But the materialist view, the view of the world, the scientific view, would say that you come from your parents, and of course that means logically you get your qualities from your parents, you get your depression from your parents, or something, or your anger, or whatever it is. Not sure. I think they say that. So then the Buddhist approach is different from both views. The radical difference in the Buddhist one, which is kind of unusual for us in our culture, is that you're not the handiwork of mummy and daddy, and you are not the handiwork of God. a creator. No view like that in Buddhism. The biggest radical difference in Buddhism is that your consciousness is not physical. And it tracks itself back to previous moments of that very consciousness, this river of mental moments, if you like, not coming from a creator and not coming from mummy and daddy. That's the biggest difference. So that's the view of karma, reincarnation and karma, which for us in our culture is the kind of a hippie idea, like as if the hippies made it up in the 60s, But it's been in the philosophical views in Asia, India, and Tibet. In India for 3,000 years, in Tibet for 1,200 years. It's the view that they take as a given, but it's a big shock for us, a big surprise for us. So that needs extra thinking if we're trying to be Buddhist. So the implication of that view is huge. Then you are able to take responsibility for what's in your mind, whether it's being good at music or good at killing. You recognize you've got these habits that you brought with you. It's not a very complicated idea, but it enables us to own responsibility, to take responsibility, not to feel like it's not my fault. I didn't ask to get born. It's got to be mummy's fault or daddy's fault. And you don't want to blame God, but some people do, But here, the Buddhist one is it's your own mind. It's a huge point. When we understand that for ourselves, this is the basis of having compassion for others. So we might, as I said, we might not be pedophiles and murderers, and terrorists. We can see we don't have those levels of intense tendencies. We can see plenty of people do in the world. And the Buddhist explanation is because they brought those habits with them. Whether you're good at music or murder, it's a habit in your mind. It's a very different view. Remember reading, that time a few years ago, 20 plus years ago, those two kids, the Columbine kids, those two guys who killed many school children. And of course, the view we all have in the world is that it must be their parents' fault. So then, and this is where people got really upset because they looked at the parents of these two boys, and they were these nice, white, Christian people. You could find no fault in particular in the way they brought up their children. But we don't believe that. We think, there's got to be some reason there. It's got to be coming from the parents. It's the only way we have, it's the only logic we have in the West, the modern materialist philosophical view of the world. We don't know where else to look except the brain and the parents, So if you can't find any fault in the parents, which we don't want to believe, then we think, well, how does it come? How do they learn all this? It's just puzzling to us. We can't understand it. Because we think, I think we think we're produced, our habits come from our parents. So if you have bad habits, even if the parents don't have them, we think, well, somehow that's because the parents didn't do a good job. I remember when I heard about the Columbine kids, reading about it, all this investigation into the parents. People got mad at the parents, but you couldn't find a reason. You couldn't find in their behavior things that they did that must have caused these two boys to be these wacky kids who want to kill people. Whereas I remember at the same time reading about this little boy whose daddy, who was black, whose daddy was in prison, whose mummy was a junkie, and they heard him and he shot somebody. That fits with our view. Oh, well, it's the parents' fault. Look at the parents. They were like that. So, of course, the kids this way. Because you couldn't say that was the Columbine kids. And that's where we get puzzled if we think it's the parents' fault. It's too limited. The Buddha's view is radically different. You bring your own mind with you. You bring your own mind with you. Okay, don't believe it. Don't just swallow it whole. It's up to us to look into it. To see that if there's truth in that. Quite subtle. If you take that on board as a Buddhist, if you really try to use that in your interpretation of yourself, then you don't just have guilt, I'm a bad person. You take responsibility. It's an old habit. You brought it with you, My mother did not have to teach me to be angry. I knew how. As a little girl, I brought it with me. So you learn, you own it. You own it. That's very courageous. But you're not set in stone. You can change it. Then when you understand that in yourself, and then you look at the people who have a tendency to be pedophiles, jump on little girls all day, or to kill or steal, then for them it's the same. They're a bunch of habits. And look at their suffering habits. And who do you think they're harming first? Themselves. That's the basis of huge compassion for everybody. this view of karma, cause and effect. But it's not a comfortable view for most of us. Because we really believe, the ego just feels. We feel it. We feel, I didn't ask to get born. I'm an innocent victim. It's God's fault, mummy's fault, daddy's fault, somebody else's fault. And it's kind of, and if you have that view, it seems to me it can only bring anger and blame, We say it as a joke. I didn't ask to get born, but it's a very serious point. So that brings a view of being an innocent victim. It's therefore not my fault. The ego wants to get off the hook. It's very strong, deep in our bones, that view. So we take the view of karma, both virtuous karma and non-virtuous karma. They are what produce the person you become. You are your own boss. That takes time to take on board. So courage comes from that, and self-confidence, and humility, and courage, and to know that you can change, and you can grow yourself into a marvelous person. And this is the basis of then seeing others and having compassion for them. But if we see a person who's angry and harming others, we just want to hate them. What do you mean he's suffering? Is he a pedophile or a murderer? What do you mean he's suffering? Because when we say someone's suffering, because of our sort of sentimental view of compassion, we think we're supposed to pat them on the head and say, oh, the poor thing can't help it. No, compassion is not like that. Compassion is very powerful. It's like tough love. It's like serious. You see the harm that other people do to each other, and out of compassion for them, you try to prevent it. It's a very different kind of compassion. It's not sentimental. It's not soft and gooey. It's very powerful. Buddha is saying we create ourselves. And he's not joking, Dalai Lama says karma is like self-creation. Everything we think and do and say is the process that produces the person we become. And we come into this life programmed by our past tendencies, and every day we have to observe our mind and see the tendencies that cause me suffering and cause me to harm others and try to lessen them, and to see the tendencies that make me happy, that help me help others, and try to grow those. That's the bottom line. That's practice. We're all in the same boat. It takes a while to get there. It's not just cross your fingers, It's got to really get through logically. And then if you can help somebody, you will. But if you can't, love them. If you can't help your brother, if your alcoholic brother does not want your damned advice, does not want to go to AA, you don't reject him. Maybe you don't invite him home because he's going to vomit in the soup and upset mum and dad. That's fine. Have some wisdom. You don't invite him home. You don't have to be sentimental, but you love him for who he is. But keep distant. No problem. So the compassion is wise. It's not foolish. You love him. You're heartbroken how he's harming himself. But you can see you can't invite him home. He makes a mess, There's a big problem. We certainly think we have compassion. We think we become all sentimental. No, be very firm. Sweetheart, if you're going to vomit in the soup, you're not going to come home for dinner, Even if he gets upset, doesn't matter. That's wise. You be wise, And have compassion for him and love him for who he is. Stop trying to force him to change. That's a tough one. So the first step, mind your own business, look at your mind, control your own body, your own speech, your own mind, get a stable practice, put yourself together, then you're qualified to help others. Then you're qualified, one step at a time. And this is also really where we understand one of the key things you could say in the Buddhist approach to the mind. You've got this, you've got these neurotic states of mind. It's just anger. But then you have another quality of the mind that's simply called intelligence. So if you see, oh, there's a war in Ukraine, that's a fact. That's a fact. That's not anger. That's a fact. But we mix the anger with the facts. So then we think, oh, I'm supposed to give up anger. Then we think, oh, you kind of give up, you throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, well, there's no war in Ukraine. Really, I'm just being angry. That'd be ridiculous. So that's the thing. That's even the example I always use, a simple one. You stub your toe. You get pain. Pain is real. Then we add anger on top of it, and we don't see the difference between the simple fact that you stubbed your toe, the fact there's a war in Ukraine, the fact that you see the person kick a dog. They are facts. But we assume that also means their anger. No. Stubbing your toe is a fact. Pain is there. But then anger is something you add on top of it. How dare that happen to me? You know, it's not fair. So we don't throw the baby out of the bathwater. And that's where seeing, you know, it's like, because we have, so I remember that I always quote this one, Martin Luther King said, it's good to find fault. Look at the suffering, look at the injustice, look at the poverty, look at the racism. They're facts. Don't just sit there and shout and yell and get angry. Say, what can I do to help? That's compassion. We assume when you see fault, you've got to get angry with it. Completely not true. This is a revelation when we can understand it. And the same with ourselves. As soon as we see a bad quality, we think, I've got to get jealous, I've got to get guilty. And guilt is just anger towards yourself. No. Look at it, observe it. See how it's causing you suffering. And then think, what can I do to change? This is a huge point, actually. That's why exactly the same. If you look at the difference between attachment and love, love is a virtuous state of mind that delights in someone else being happy. You want them to be happy, and you grow this wish that people be happy. But attachment completely poisons it, completely pollutes it. We assume they're the same. So we assume if I'm going to give up attachment, oh, I've got to give up my heart, I've got to give up my boyfriend. No, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. See the difference in your mind between them. And this is really the essence of being, you know, being the Buddhist approach to the mind. But the virtues, the facts, there is a war. The fact, you stub your toe. That's a fact. That's not virtuous or non-virtuous, it's a fact. But we assume finding fault means being angry. No. But often, of course, the other problem is we think we're seeing facts. But usually, like if you say, oh, look at that person, they're, you know, look at that person, they're being so mean. But they're not being mean, but you're seeing them through the lens of your anger. So you've got to be clear what a fact is. Not easy. Anger distorts, you know. When the attachment and anger and jealousy, when they overwhelm our mind, they pollute everything. We can't see clearly, and therefore we can't be virtuous, you know. But, you know, it's like, you can change something. It's Shanti Deva. If you can change something, please change it. If you can make the war go away, if you can stop the brother being alcoholic, please do it. But what if you can't? That's where the practice starts. That's where if you have lots of attachment, there's emotional hunger. You see the terrible way the world is, and you see you can't change it. That's when we go crazy and kill ourselves because we can't cope. So lessening the attachment and anger is really very courageous. Then you greet the world. And then you say, oh my God, look at the world, look at the suffering. What can I do to help? And if there's nothing you can do, then you can't go to Ukraine. You can't go to Israel and make Gaza all come back into nice, you know, nice. You can't do that. But so this is where you can't make the world a better place necessarily overnight, but you can do what you can right here. Help that ant, that dog, that human being. Do what you can here. Don't have these grand ideas of changing the world, you know. Help one person at a time. And I think doing that, even though you see the war, you see the suffering out there, it doesn't distress you so much, because if you have the view of karma, you understand why it's happening. You have compassion. But meanwhile, you don't become hopeless. You do what you can according to your capacity. So if you can be like Martin Luther King and start an entire movement of hundreds of thousands of people around the world, great, go for it, baby. If you can't, help your dog, help your next door neighbor, one step at a time. You don't have to look like Mother Teresa, you know, or Martin Luther King for that matter. If you can, amazing. Do what you can. And the other thing is about that helps you, gives you courage. You do what you can. That's profound. That's why so often you see, I know before I was a Buddhist, I was very involved in all the kind of, you know, radical left kind of political activity for like 10 years. And I saw, really, it was very interesting, people who work day and night in their political activity and demonstrating and doing this and doing that, and they go home and beat up their children. So they're all very noble and grand about the big picture in the world, but couldn't even be kind to their own family. Well, what's the point of that? Well, the same with being a Buddhist. You know, I'm a Buddhist, I'm working on my mind, I'm meditating. Then your children make a noise. Shut up, I'm meditating. What good is that? You know, oh, I'm meditating. Well, screw you. Put your money where your mouth is and be kind to people. You know? It's easy to happen. I remember this, I remember in Australia, we had this couple. My mother was a musician, and my father was, I think he was a journalist. I don't know, he's a bit hopeless. And we started a business. It was a printing business. It included editing and writing. And all our kids come to our apprenticeship, learning how to edit and do typesetting and all these things. I remember and my mother then started to work in the business as well. She took her time off from teaching people music and ran the business. But she was very open-minded. So we're all Catholic. Many of our clients in the printing company, we had the Catholic Church, and we had the communist unions. You understand? So I remember this guy, he was famous in Australia as one of the big main unionists. Unions were big in Australia, you know, the labor unions. And this guy called John Halfpenny. And my sister, who's a Catholic, she was 16, 17. And then John is married. Well, my mother loved John. My mother's a Catholic, and she loved this communist unionist, you know. And we did all this printing for him for his big union. And my sister had a relationship with him. So he'd come in home to my mother's house, sleep with my sister Janet. He'd call my mother Billy, it was her name. And Mum put up with him. It was so strange. Oh, I'm telling you the story, but I am. But what I'm getting at is he was this radical union. Everybody in the whole Australia loved him, all the unions did. But he was cheating on his wife, you know, with my sister. My mum didn't seem to care. It was so funny. So you can be very noble and go out, you know, and change the world, and then never take care of your kids, never take care of your wife or your husband, for that matter. So it's easy to be all grand. Oh, I'm a Buddhist, I'm meditating, but you're mean to everybody else. What good is that? It's so arrogant. You know? Put your money where your mouth is. Be kind to one person. Easy to live in the head and the theory, you know. Ask some questions, people. Any questions?
So that Nicole has a question.
Huh? What?
Nicole has a question.
Hello, Nicole. Talk to me, sweetheart.
Oh, that was a while ago. But I have a comment on what you just said. I've been that person who yells at my kids, "I'm meditating, be quiet." And I think through practice, it's helped me to stop yelling when
Stop yelling at the kids.
Yeah, when I'm meditating, I've learned through all of this how to speak gently and still ask for what I need. So thank you for.
Oh, that's good. That's wonderful. There you go. So it's the proof of the pudding.
Yes.
Oh, well done, girl. No, it's possible. One step at a time. So let's bring ourselves down to earth. It's been very practical. You know? It's true. Well done, girl. Someone else has something to say? How about you, Susie? Because she's got 3 boys in her family she has to take care of. So they're making you crazy, or you're doing well these days?
Thank you for the
3
teaching.
boys. Huh?
I still shout. Thank you for the teachings. I still shout, and then I catch myself in the middle of the shout.
At least in the middle.
I'm doing my
At
practice.
least in the middle. That's good. Better than nothing. It takes time, doesn't it? It really is. To say these words, that to be like what we're saying is so advanced, actually, Susie. So as long as we have, it's not like you can aim for it, but know where we're at with it and be very humble, and then rejoice in our practice and rejoice in our progress, I think. That's the one, yeah. I mean, really, you know, I think being a mother or a wife or a husband with children is the hardest job on the planet. Because that's where you find, that's where all the murders are. It's not even a joke, you know. They say that the majority of women who get murdered on the planet, 40% of the women who get murdered, the person who murders them is in the same family. So that shows, so I mean, it's all very nice to have families. It sounds very lovely. But if the majority of women who get murdered are in the person in the family, it's not being racist, it's not being sexist. It's just reality, showing the intensity of living too close with other human beings when you can't control your own mind. My God, yeah, go. Good, darling, talk to me. Sure.
So when it comes to this bodhicitta,
What, sweetheart?
when it comes to the bodhicitta,
This is the result of lots and lots of love and compassion.
yes. So, okay, because going back to what you're saying, that it's one thing to be able to say that you care about ending the suffering of all people or all animals or the world, but it's a whole other thing to actually get to that state of mind and
That's
that
right.
state of
And you've got to
being.
know where you're at in the process.
And it starts within yourself
That's exactly
and
right.
sorting through all of the.
Yeah. So did you have it? So you want to say that?
I
That's
just
true.
wanted to make sure
No,
the
that's important.
clarification.
You see, that's where again I think we understand this. If you want to learn to play tennis and you go to see Roger Federer play tennis, what you're seeing is the bodhisattvas of tennis. You understand my point? The highest level of tennis. And you go, I want to be like that. But you know that when you go to your first class, you don't go home and kill yourself because you can't do it like Roger Federer. You know, it's years and years and years of practice and you're prepared to persevere. It's the same with hearing about love and compassion. But often we say, oh, I've been trying, you know, I tried to meditate, but it doesn't work. And I tried to give up anger, and we despair because we don't realize it's a process. So you've got to have the goal. Imagine what it's like to have bodhicitta, being like Roger Federer, that's the analogy, and then go one step at a time. Rejoice in your progress, be realistic about where you're at, but know you can move forward. And often again, with love and compassion, we don't think you can grow it. This is a big, big, important point, you know, and rejoice in our progress. Rejoice in our progress. Rejoice. That's the point. What do you think, people? Any more questions?
I have another.
That's okay. Go on, yeah. Who's talking?
Nicole.
Hello, Nicole, go. Sweetheart, go.
This was my question from before. For people who don't know I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about people who don't recognize their suffering, because I always sort of knew I was suffering, but I didn't know there was a different way. I just thought
Say that a bit. It's an important point. So say it a bit. Say it again to me. What do you mean by that?
So when I grew up, I was told that these are just my genetics.
Oh, I see. Okay. You mean being angry or anxious or depressed? It's just genetics.
Yeah,
That's what you said.
just my genetics.
So that's, I think, before you go further, that's what I think we think in our culture. We give equal status to anxiety and neurosis as well as love and compassion. We just think as long as you have a little bit of everything, you're an okay person. We don't see it as something you can change, you know. That's a big one. So then go on, continue, say.
Yeah, so I think I hear my kids talk a lot about, they look around and they see what, perfect families, mom, dad, dog, cars, money.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And they don't necessarily see the suffering that those
That's
families
right.
are experiencing.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm thinking those families don't even see their, like, when you get to if you have a happy marriage and you get to the end of your life and your partner dies and then you're suffering. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm asking what is it that, I'm curious about people who don't know they're suffering.
I understand. Okay, I think the point here is, I think what we're saying is very clear. If you look at the Buddha's, his first teaching called the Four Noble Truths, the framework is this concept of suffering. So he says, first, there is suffering, and he presents three levels. The second, there's the causes. Third, he has found that that you can be free of suffering and its causes. And the fourth is the methodology. It's a practical presentation. But the key to understanding all that is the first one, which is what is suffering. And he says the first kind of suffering is what we think of suffering: poor, sick, poverty, homeless, in prison, the gross level of suffering. And that's evident. And that, I think, is the only way we really think of suffering. So if you think of a family who's suffering, you'd say, oh, it's because they're poor or homeless or they're suffering. But then you've got a family where there's mum and there's dad and there's kids and the dog, and they've got money in the bank and there's a spare and there's a pension plans and they go on holidays. On the outside, it looks happy because it hasn't got the gross suffering, but there's all the internal stuff, and because we hide that from the world, you try not to show your anxiety, you try not to show your anger, to show your guilt, you keep that private. And maybe those two parents fight like cats and dogs, but never show it to the outside world. And then we know the people feel incredible suffering, but it's mental. It's not the grosser level. I think in our culture these days, we're accepting this more and more, but still, I think we feel ashamed of it. So we keep it hidden. And then it's only when you completely want to kill yourself, you creep off guiltily to the therapist. Whereas the Buddhist approach is, if we start to look into our minds and work on our minds before the dramas come, we can allay a lot of that suffering. So it's the mental one that's the biggest one. It's the mental one, the attachment, the anxiety, the jealousy, and especially the stuff that we hide, Then I think that's really when people, and if we don't own, put it this way, even, we can say, I am anxious. We can say, I'm depressed. We can admit that it's suffering, but our trouble is we think it's everybody else's fault. And then we get angry and we blame. The Buddhist approach is, sure, you are anxious, you are depressed, but we can own that. Yes, the external conditions are the trigger for it. And if we can change the external conditions, please do it. And I think half the time, if you think about it, I'm just using the example of women who get murdered, but if those women who got murdered had enough self-respect, all of us the same, to notice that we're in a nightmare relationship, get the hell out before he murders you. But we don't. We're victims and we live in denial, and then we end up like being lemmings, and then we get murdered. I'm sort of being extreme here. And we all know in our culture the talk about the suffering of being a victim. You go back like a moth to a flame. Keep going back to the abuser, So it's kind of a level of suffering in the mind that's really powerful. And to own that as your own is very hard. It's just hard. And the fact of the matter is, you can't, until you see this is why you are suffering, you can't have compassion for anyone else. You understand? Because this is the first level. If we were able to work on our attachment and anger and jealousy and pride and low self-esteem, you wouldn't ever harm other people because you're working on yourself first. We don't even notice. You understand? Just recently, one of my friends here in Santa Fe, his partner's brother was in a bar with this dude whom he knew, and they had a fight. And the dude shot the brother, and then out of utter despair, noticing what he had done, he then shot himself. If that's not the most painful experience you can imagine. Because they were both out of control, didn't own their own qualities. One had a gun. If you're going to have a gun, honey, and an uncontrolled mind, you're going to have dead people, But he noticed what he'd done soon after he killed him. And he killed this boy, and he was so overwhelmed. Can you imagine himself? So he killed himself right there. That's unbearable, isn't it? If that's not suffering, I don't know what is. The mind, Who's that? Huh? What? What's happening? Come on in. What's happening? Oh, good idea. Okay, good. Okay, wonderful. Okay, good. Great. Okay, what else, people? And that's the biggest one. I say it again and again and again and again and again. And it's so true. Our trouble in our culture is we only notice the problems, the emotional problems, when they are emotional, when the body is shaking. Literally, we don't even notice our mind. We don't notice the angry thoughts. We don't notice the depressed thoughts. We don't notice the anxious thoughts until they got to the level of emotion, which is when the body's shaking. And that's when we think, my God, I've got a problem. But that's like the wheels falling off. And I joke, but I mean it so sincerely. We never wait till the wheels fall off before you go to the mechanic. Nobody's wheels ever fall off on a freeway. You might crash, but you notice the wobbles, you fix your oil, you fix the brakes, you fix your wheels, so your car stays steady. We take care of our houses like that. We take care of our teeth like that. We take care of our bodies. We don't wait till everything's collapsing, unless you're completely out of your mind. But when it comes to emotions, we don't even notice until we become emotional. Whereas the Buddha's skill gives us the ability to notice all the crazy thoughts in the head before they get to the level of emotion. And that's when you can start to do the work. You don't wait till it's too late. The commonest question is, I'm about to murder my husband. What will I do? That's your wheels falling off. That's like going at 120 miles an hour and you've never taken care of your wheels and you go, oh, my wheels just fell off. What will I do? A little bit late, I'm sorry. It's a really major point. So that's why if we pay attention to our mind, have a practice every day. As Susie said, she now notices in the middle of shouting, not afterwards once you've hit your kid, Well, she doesn't hit a kid, but just, you see what I'm saying? And that's our trouble, and that's our culture. We even talk about feelings, just thoughts. We don't even pay attention. We don't even know we have thoughts. That's why they say when you start to do a little bit of meditation, one of the signs of success is you think your mind's getting worse. It's not. You're just noticing it for the first time. This is tremendously important. We have to pay attention to what the hell is going on in our mind before it gets to the level of emotion, which is when the body's shaking. So either you only notice that you're angry when the words are vomiting out your mouth, or you only notice you're so depressed because you're inert in bed and unable to move. Too late. Too late. This is the skill we have to learn. This is tremendous, I tell you. And that's why also, this is where the subtler level of suffering. Let's say you're in a relationship and it's wonderful and you love each other and the kids and the house and everything's so wonderful, and that can be, and I'm so happy for you. But because we don't notice the difference in our mind between attachment and love, so being happy means attachment's getting what it wants. And it's wonderful to get what you want. It's wonderful to have a good relationship. It's wonderful to see you have everything in the bank and the money and the food and the good health. This is wonderful. But because everything is going nicely, we don't notice the attachment in the mind. And then all of a sudden hubby dies, or you get cancer, or hubby leaves you for a younger version. And it's the biggest shock on the planet and you go crazy. Because we don't even think of attachment being a problem until it doesn't get what it wants. Are we communicating? So that's a subtle level. So to see your anger, that's easy to see in comparison. But to see attachment is way too subtle, especially when it's getting what it wants. But the second it doesn't, that's when the dramas happen. And it's a shock to us because we haven't paid attention to our mind. That's Buddha's expertise. I'm sorry to tell you, it's Buddha's expertise. It didn't come from Mr. Bloody Freud 100 years ago. Mr. Buddha's been on the case for 2,500 years. Having the skills to see your mind, to hear them, and distinguish between the neuroses and the virtues. That's the bottom line. And the other thing I find interesting too, in our culture, I've got a feeling in our general approach to psychology, with all these words and these complicated labels for all the different mental states. But I don't think we acknowledge the presence in our mind of the virtues and the ethical states of mind. We don't factor in ethics. So my feeling is you can have a crazy mind, berserk, but you've got ethics. So you'll be okay. You'll be fine. But if a person's got a crazy mind, but also you know, is a bit of I'm not being rude, has intense attachment and craving and lies and steals and manipulates other people, they're the ones who will never get successful because they don't have ethics to back them up. It's not being rude, you know. The number of times, like, for example, one in a class, she's in tears. What do I do about my 15-year-old daughter? She throws chairs at me, you know. I said, good. First thing I say is, tell me about her good qualities. She's kind. She doesn't steal. She doesn't lie. She loves animals. She's got a big heart. I said, she'll be fine. You see what I'm saying? That's ethics. That's seeing the good qualities in you. But if the negative ones are overwhelming, and they can be. I was berserk as a kid, you know. But I had ethics. Fortunately. When I was 12 years old, in the 1950s, stealing my mother's lipstick and high heels, dressing up like you know, it was the time of Elvis. My mother wouldn't let us listen to Elvis. Then I was walking down with lipstick that I'd stolen, earrings, my mum, walking up and down the main street trying to seduce the greengrocer's son. I mean, she was so shocked she sent me to boarding school. Then I wanted to be a nun. So it was a weird part of me, both together. I couldn't work it out. I wanted to be a nun. My father used to say, she'll be a prostitute or a nun. About me. You know? So I had the virtues. You can fall back on your virtues, you know. You've got the virtues. They're your saving grace. So see those in your kid, not just his crazy behavior, you know. It's not being critical. It's being very practical. Got virtue, got ethics, got goodness. That's the stuff to encourage. And that's where even if you've got virtue, and it can be this way, this is the sad part, but you've got this intense craving, and you end up being a junkie, and alcohol and drugs, you destroy yourself. And even though you've got a good heart, is where that can be overwhelming. You know, that's very tough. That's very painful. What else? Maybe that's enough today. It's only an hour. I want to cheat you. What else do you want to talk about? Anything else to talk about? Nothing.
I could tell you an anecdote if you want to. Can I tell?
Tell us a story, Nicole.
So yesterday, I started the day off by saying I was going to notice the positive qualities of others, particularly my kids. And then I was tired at 9 o'clock, and I went out to say goodnight. I have an 18-year-old and a 22-year-old, and the 18-year-old said, "Oh, Mom, come outside and sit with us." And I immediately felt defensive and angry because I was tired, and she's asking me.
That's right. That's right.
So I said, "Well, somebody woke me up from a nap today," and then
you said what to them? What did you say?
She had woken me up from a nap in the afternoon, excited to tell me about whatever. So I said, "Well, someone woke me up from a nap, so now I'm tired." And she pointed it out, and I recognized it, and I went back and I said, "Sweetheart, what I wish I would have said is, thank you for the invitation. I'm really tired." And because I was feeling
what's the learning in this? Why don't you say the better learning would have been, of course, sweetheart, and sit down and talk to them for 5 minutes and then go to bed?
Oh, that's Bodhisattva, though.
No, that's not Bodhisattva. That's grabbing. No. Not
Yeah.
even asking you to stay more than 5 minutes, just delaying your sleep for 5 minutes. That'd be the very best.
Thank you.
That's not even Bodhisattva. That's just, you know, that's because they often, and I know your point, but you tried to fix it a bit better. But we have to see, so there's the anxiety, wasn't there? Attachment to, because sleep is such a powerful attachment. But if you're brave enough, you could have known even 3 minutes, they would have appreciated even 3 minutes, but we can't catch it in time, isn't it? So that's a big learning. I'm not trying to be critical.
No, I appreciate that because I think,
Of course, in other words, of course, sweetheart. You know, of course, I'd love to sit down. And you give them 5 minutes, really quality, and then you snuck off to bed, you know. It would have been possible. But that really takes practice. And I'm sure Susie the same with her kids, you know. I mean, living with kids. And I think sleep is a tremendous attachment. When you're tired, it can do nothing, you know. So even just so they often say that this is the point about the two different wings of the bird, the practice. When you're on your own, you work on your mind. When you're with others, you're there for their benefit. So you do what's best for them. So if you're not able to do that, keep out of their way almost, you know. It's pretty intense. And being a mother is too much, I think. It's too intense. If you're on the case 18 hours a day, it's incredible. Anyway, Susie is in the same position, I'm sure, as Nicole, except she's got 2 little ones as well as a big one. You've got 2 big ones. Anyway.
Can I ask one more question about it?
Yeah, go.
My attachment is to my morning practice. So I
Your
want
attachment what, Nicole? Your attachment what?
I have a big attachment to my morning practice. So it is, I guess when you say, when you say sit with them for 5 minutes, I almost feel tears. Yeah, I do feel tears. Like you're right. Thank you. Yeah. No,
But let's talk about what do you mean by your attachment to your morning practice?
because I
Got to be
want
very careful how we use that word. Attachment is referring to a neurotic, needy state of mind that exaggerates the deliciousness of something. So I don't think you can exaggerate the benefits of your practice. So don't call it attachment. Now listen to me. If it's attachment, Nicole, and you're sitting there meditating and then you shout at your children, I'm meditating, then that's not practice and that's attachment. So if you like doing your morning practice, I rejoice. Wow. You rejoice in that and be so happy.
I think I am really trying to become a kind, compassionate person. And I know that what you said is stay out of their way. It's complicated to stay out of their way when we live in it's yeah. No, I don't.
That's where we've got to know our own. That's what we have to. I mean, that's where if we do live with a lot of other human beings, family, which is so intense, you've got to have incredible discipline to make sure you can close the door. Even you go to the toilet for 5 minutes and lock the door. You've got to be really conscious of how you're so susceptible to the external events. You're going to lose your plot and get angry. You've got to really be aware of what you can handle. And then you won't be one of the 40% of women who get murdered. And that takes tremendous self-discipline, you know. You've got to know what you can handle. So sometimes you don't have a choice. If you've got 2 little boys and they're going berserk, you don't have the luxury of walking out the door. You don't. So you just got to do your best. That's why you've got to make sure you have your morning practice, make sure you have some space. And that's where but it's hard because attachment is so huge. And let's say you have a partner, let's say, and you've got this intense relationship with each other. You're like magnets for each other. You've got to really resist that magnet and go take your own space, you know. It's a huge one. And that's why I think, I'm not kidding, it always sounds like a joke. But if you live together in a house with a partner, I think it's expecting too much of an ordinary human being to live in the same bed, in the same room as another human, with your farts and your snores and all your dramas. It's too much to expect, you know. You've got to have, I know reading in the New York Times one time in the wedding section, relationship section, there's this interviews with different partners who decided they have their own bedrooms. So the trauma initially was they're being rejected, they freaked out. And then but the benefit was incredible because each person can grow their own feeling and have their own shapes and colors and behave nicely and be harmonious when they're together. I mean, to put up with these, people say almost with a snoring person in the same bed, you practically want to kill them. Well, have your own bed, you know. It's so intelligent. But oftentimes we haven't got the real estate to do it. That's our problem because we're all poor, you know. And people think, oh, it's going against the other person. It's just plain intelligence. It's too much to expect of ordinary humans being in each other's face all day. I don't know how people do it, quite frankly. So do our best. Get some space when you can. Budget it in. We often have poverty mentality. Oh, no, I couldn't afford a nanny. Well, yes, you better afford a nanny if you can. Do you understand? It's a crucial thing because, I mean, it's so typical. The woman's supposed to put up with it day and night, you know, treated like a slave, never get paid. Or telling your husband, if you've got a husband who pays the wages, demand he gets nanny money. I think Susie does that. You have a certain budget, don't you, Susie, for nannies when you need time off? So insensible. You've got to have that, isn't it? Got to recognize ourselves, you know. That's what we call that self-compassion. That's called intelligence. You know your mind well enough. Anyway, people, I think it's enough today. All right. Hour and a quarter. gone like a dream. So if there's been even 1% of something that's useful, we try to put it into practice, develop our own amazing potential, have some self-respect. Self-compassion is like self-respect. We need it desperately. You know, take responsibility for our body, speech, and mind. And then the more we do that, the more capable we are of seeing others and helping them. So we delight, okay? Chang chub sem chog rinpoche, ma ke panon ke gu chig, ke pa nyampa, me pa yang gong ne gondu, kaba sho. Okay, people, that's all. Enough. Thank you, sweethearts. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, people. Thank you, thank you.